Hi, I'm Superintendent of Public Instruction Chris Reykdal, and thank you so much for tuning in to our weekly conversation here. This week we are dedicating our time and our questions to educators out there, teachers and counselors and librarians and paraeducators. We've got a lot of questions that have come in, and we've tried to put them in some pretty consistent themes. I first just want to thank everybody for the incredible work that's happening around the state. It was a tough week for all of us to have the governor get to the complex decision that he had to make around closing schools for the rest of the year to our traditional face-to-face learning model. I know it was tough for him. I appreciate the partnership very much with him, and I've been grateful that he's asked so much feedback of educators, of our superintendents, our school board members, principals. A lot of folks have influenced his decisions as part of that process. Let's get into our questions because we have some really good ones today. First, several teachers, Michelle, Nathan, and Heather, and probably a lot of the rest of you, have asked, what does continuous learning mean to you? Are you checking in with each school district to see exactly what is being done? Continuous learning for us here at OSPI and what we've guided districts to is really this idea that we really want every family engaged, every student identified, the distribution of learning opportunities for students, and a check-in with them. When this was just going to be a short-term closure or even a 6-week closure, I think we could think a little differently about this. But now that we're talking the rest of the year, again, 325 instructional hours as we discussed on the whiteboard last week, we have to really double down on our connections with families and provide learning opportunities. We've been pretty clear with districts that we expect this, and we're collecting data from them now on what their efforts look like. Who are they reaching? How are they reaching them? Is it synchronous online instruction? Is it packets? We're getting a really good sense now of how diverse that deployment is, and of course it really is diverse given the lack of connectivity for some folks. So thanks Michelle, Nathan, and Heather for that. What are you doing to make sure everyone has access to the internet and devices? This comes from Paula, Rachel, Tony, Kim. They're teachers, librarians, one's a principal. Ensure is a tough word. At OSPI, we can't make this happen quickly. What we have identified through the incredible feedback of our teachers and our administrators is just how much gap there is in a lot of communities. We're working with cable providers, those who bring direct high speed to the home. We're working with our Department of Commerce, who has a concept to essentially light up 100 facilities around the state for Wi-Fi. It won't have a big broadcast, but it would allow a lot of communities, a lot of students to at least get to our buildings, stay outside of them, get connectivity if they don't have it. But there's real possibilities here between direct connection and this Wi-Fi concept. We're working with all of them. Our school districts are deploying devices like crazy right now. Many are providing hotspot access for students. It obviously depends a lot on where you live, and that's the challenge of a local control state. And it really highlights the inequities that we've had in access to technology long before this event. So we're all doing our best to make this possible for students. The challenge to districts is if you can't get the connectivity, you still need to engage students in learning. This comes from Shannon, Nicole, Matt, and Stacy, and Heidi. They're all teachers. I've heard you mention the potential of longer days next year. What would be the need for this if we're working really hard right now and we're engaging students? Yeah, I want to make sure I'm really clear about this. And the legislature actually decides by law our 180-day school year and our roughly 1,000-hour instructional obligation. OSPI has the opportunity to waive days and hours for a disruption like this, but we don't get to add time at OSPI. That would be a consideration of the legislature. I think what's emerged in conversations with teachers and legislators and even the governor in his contemplation is, can we get schedules more flexible in the future? What would it look like to diminish summer learning in the future? These will all be negotiated locally. Calendars are negotiated locally, unless the legislature wants to add resources and expand our calendar next year. But this is something at this point that I think is a consideration at the local level. How do you increase learning and really maximize time for the next year or two within the 180 days or the roughly 1,000 instructional hour model? And I've heard some really good ideas on how to do that. And I would encourage you to keep thinking about that locally. A question here from Melissa, Heather, Heidi, Carolyn, and Kimberly, all educators across the state. Will there be statewide consistency around grading this time? And will there be differences by grade levels? This is a really complicated question. We've got an amazing team that built a continuous learning guiding document that we sent out this week, and that was about 20 folks, and 10 of them were classroom teachers. We really tried to reach all over the state to folks who are really close to teaching and learning on that. We're going to pull them back together early next week to talk about this. We think the K-8 world is very different than the high school world. In K-8, we can definitely demonstrate student understanding. Teachers and their high-quality professional judgment get to make decisions about students, and I expect our students to move to the next grade. I also expect our high school students to get their credits. It's just tough because if you give them letter grades, you got to make a good determination about what you know about our students now. If you go to a pass no credit system, there may be implications for them in post-secondary. So we're exploring all of those questions right now, trying to work with our higher ed partners, and they're working really hard in higher ed to help us understand this. They've got the same challenges we do. They're doing everything they can to get answers to families, and we're going to keep partnering with them to get you a good answer about this. Again, we've got a great group of educators coming together on that. Lisa is a teacher. She says, will the SBA be back next year and allow for more time for teaching if we didn't have it? Anya is a school counselor. She has a similar question about juniors maybe needing the SBA to fulfill their pathway requirement. We immediately waived state testing this year, got rid of it this year, wanted to maximize time for direct teaching and learning. The feds will actually decide whether we have a waiver the next year. They've granted all the states a waiver now, so there will be no contemplation about that at this time. But we don't have permission to void the federally mandated tests next year. They would have to think about that further. I certainly understand the question. If assessment is done well, it can be a real powerful tool for us to check in and understand learning, but it's certainly not the end all. Most of you know how I feel about standardized tests and the need to shrink the time we spend on them. But the feds have a big part in this, and we'll keep working with them on that. And our legislature will have a lot to say about how we treat assessments in the coming years. So there's a long tail to this entire event, and it doesn't end just when we get good science, we get a vaccine, and we return to school. There's a lot of policy making that's going to be implicated by this. Finally, we have a really awesome question here from Erin. She's a teacher. What is your hope for what educators will take away from this experience? What can we learn from this is really the question. It's so profound, Erin, and for all of you thinking about this, I'm grounded in a truth that has guided my work. There is no substitute for our face-to-face model. Delivering content online is content, and it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Our students can find it. But our teaching and learning is not just about knowledge. It's not just about knowing. That's an important part of what we do. It ultimately helps us understand how children and our students are developing their knowledge and their skills. But teaching and learning is about relationships. So I think what we're learning here is we're coming back to a face-to-face model because it's awesome and it works really well. But we also know it didn't always work well even in that model. If you relied on technology to give homework assignments, you relied on technology for students to produce work and writing, to check into their grades, to be connected to counselors or other professionals, it's now under a magnifying glass just how disparate our technology access is for our families. And we're running through walls to create that opportunity now, but I take from this we have to be better at that and put it in context. Going online or fully at a distance is not the best teaching model for most of our students. It's an option for some. It works really well for some in higher education, probably some of our high school students. But what I take from this is we need to be better at understanding our deficits and our gaps and the implicit bias that was in our system before, because now there's a spotlight on it. And when we return to that better model, we get to rethink technology in a very different way. It's an awesome question, Erin. I know a lot of folks are thinking about it, and I'm really grateful that you asked. And I think there's always a balance between our leadership needs, the risks that we take, the compassion we share, but we also have to keep a smile on our face, and we have to keep hope, and we have to keep some laughter involved. So please, everybody, students and parents and educators, keep the questions coming. They can be fun. They can be very, very serious. We'll find the right balance. I am grateful for your work, educators. I am thankful to be a part of this profession. You are the heart and soul of democracy. You are the heart and soul of learning. You are the heart and soul of a workforce development system that begins with our kindergartners. And I'm so proud of you. Please keep at it. Let's make continuous learning work as best we can through this year. And let's be really vigilant about our return to school this fall in ways that are more equitable and more focused on student success for all of our students. Thanks a lot. I'll see you next week.